We're on? We're live? Okay, thank you. I'd like to call this meeting to order on July 14, 2021 at 6 p.m. I'd like to take roll call to trustees. Trustee Linden? Here. Trustee Britz? Present. Trustee Bashaw? Yes. Trustee Johnston? Yes. Will we please all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll have approval of the minutes.
I'm sorry. Is that me? Sorry. Whereas notice of this meeting was given to the Board of Trustees and the news media as required by law, now therefore be it resolved that a special meeting of this Board of Trustees be held at this time and place to consider any business that may come before the Board.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Trustee Linden? Aye. Trustee Britz? Yes. Trustee Bashaw?
Yes.
Trustee Johnston?
Yes.
Carried. I guess okay. This being the time and place for the public hearing for the Village of Fredonia's submission of one or more Community Development Block Grant CDBG applications for the 2021 program year. Proof of publication shown. I call this hearing to order. Before we have a public portion, I would like to read actually Travis will be doing a presentation, but Paul Snyder from the county wanted to present to the board as well, and everybody has in front the email that he gave me to read. He would like me to read this out to the public here. As you know, the health department has long supported the construction of a major interconnection between the Village of Fredonia and the City of Dunkirk as a means of serving as an emergency supply for the village. If constructed today, the interconnection would actually be with the North County Water District, which is served by the City of Dunkirk. The Village of Fredonia has experienced many water emergencies in recent years where a major interconnection would have been extremely beneficial. The most recent significant emergency took place in September 2020, where the water treatment plant had issues with providing proper filtration and the finished drinking water was not in compliance with New York State Department of Health finished water turbidity standards, which ultimately resulted in a months-long boil water order. As I have stated in a previous virtual meeting, if a major interconnection was in place prior to the water plant experiencing these problems, the water plant could have been taken out of operation or isolated from the village's distribution system while the village residents were served drinking water from an interconnection with the North County Water District, thus significantly shortening the length of the boil water order from a month to possibly a few days. This is only one of many other scenarios where the interconnection would be beneficial to the village, but it would also benefit the City of Dunkirk as well. The village is planning on performing some much needed work to the reservoir and spillway in the future. Work to the reservoir includes dredging it to restore the storage volume back to the original design volume. During this dredging work, having an interconnection in place would allow the water plant to remain offline while the raw water turbidity was higher due to the disruption of the sediment on the bottom of the reservoir. One other important factor to consider when evaluating the need of the interconnection is what the future Brooks Memorial Hospital requires: a redundant supply of drinking water. Currently, the Village of Fredonia does not have a redundant supply, even if taken into consideration the existing interconnections. Furthermore, the village still lacks enough finished water storage volume to meet both domestic and fire demands, which compounds the problem even further. I have attached a letter of support that I wrote to the former Mayor Landis back on March 13, 2019. This letter explains much of what I discussed above. However, because of the recent improvements made to the existing interconnection on Vineyard Drive and water main construction on Route 60, the same issues with pressure loss may have been minimized. Yesterday, I performed a sanitary survey of Fredonia's water supply with Casey Miller from our department. During the survey, we were pleased to see the much needed work to water plant being performed and witnessed some work that has already been completed. Given the village's location in North County, it could potentially be an essential source of drinking water for the region. The current work being completed at the water plant, along with the newly constructed interconnection with the North County Water District, would prove vital to providing a safe source of drinking water supply to the region. The Health Department still strongly supports a major interconnection with the North County Water District and hopes that the village will take advantage of any grants available to complete this much-needed project. Thank you, and as always, please contact me anytime you have anything further to discuss. Okay, that being read, Travis, please take the floor.
So as part of the grant, the Community Development Block Grant, we are required to hold this public hearing to solicit feedback from the community about the projects that we may be interested in engaging in for this grant. So as it says here, the public hearing requirements are required by state and federal law, open meeting laws. This is standard meeting procedure for CDBG applicants for grant money. All applicants must issue public hearing notice like we've done. And because this is not just, we're applying for the grant through New York State, however, it is federal funding, which is why we refer to it as CDBG funding, Community Development Block Grant funding, as well as HCR, Homes and Community Renewal funding. And this hearing, as I mentioned, is to discuss any proposed projects being proposed for this Community Development Block Grant funding. Just as a background for everybody, for the community, this HCR funding or CDBG funding does have funding limits that New York State has put in place, where the public infrastructure, which would include water treatment, things of that nature, has a funding limit of $1 million. Public facilities has a funding limit of $300,000, and community planning has a funding limit of $500,000. Bear in mind, this community planning money does not include master planning or comprehensive planning. So,
Not 500,000, right? That's just 50,000, right?
Did I say 500?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, 50,000. Yeah, so $1 million for public infrastructure, $300,000 for public facilities, and $50,000 for community planning. And grantees or applicants need to choose from one of these areas to select a project that is most shovel-ready and a project that's going to be able to utilize the greatest amount of funding possible the most efficient way. The project that we had been exploring was the freshwater dam and engineering of that with the as the engineer from the county mentioned, the spillway and the reservoir. We had been exploring that. However, with the numbers provided by Clark Patterson Lee, we had, and the information that we've been continuing to get, the more shovel-ready project that we had discovered based on this was the Fredonia-Dunkirk water interconnection. This would be used for emergency purposes only. Paul Snyder laid out in his letter pretty detailed information about why this would be beneficial to the village. Having a fully redundant water system is something that the Brooks Hospital has mentioned specifically as an impediment to moving into Fredonia, even though they really want to move into Fredonia. So that is a big thing. Having fully redundant water is something that we are able to achieve using this grant funding. In addition to that, this demonstrates a regional perspective, which is something that the Regional Economic Development Council, which reviews these grant applications, really wants to see, seeing that we're willing to work with other municipalities and other agencies across the North County. So it can also be a source of revenue in times when those other municipalities may be in a time of need, an emergency situation. And again, having that emergency connection would allow Fredonia to avoid issues relating to water quality moving forward associated with the dam and the spillway and the reservoir. And that's a picture of what a typical interconnection kind of looks like. We do have, in the packets that I know the trustees have been handed out, we do have a map of where the interconnection would be located.
Where are these handouts?
Do you? It's the last page of the letter.
Yes.
This handout?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, so in the last page of the letter, you can see drawings C01 from Clark Patterson Lee. which indicates in the middle where the interconnection would be located along Central Avenue, along a 12-inch water supply piping. So the cost estimates that Clark Patterson Lee put together for this project really set it apart because they're current and they're the most attainable out of the projects or the most bite-sized out of the projects that we have been looking at. This project would include furnishing and installing that 12-inch water main, connecting to the existing main, putting the prepackaged booster pump into place, excavation, mobilization, maintenance, protection of traffic, things of that nature. They have a pretty detailed cost estimate here that includes contingencies and legal, engineering, and administrative fees with a grand total project cost of nearly $2.5 million. Obviously, there's a gap there, and that's something that I'm assuming that you all would want to discuss this evening. It is, but we wanted to present this as a project that is shovel-ready and able to utilize this grant funding without having the village have to take out a substantial bond to do a project that it may not be quite as shovel-ready to do. So
How is this more shovel-ready than anything else?
we don't have engineering costs, like preliminary engineering costs for the spillway, the earthen dams, and the actual reservoir itself. We don't have, I haven't seen those. I've seen numbers from 2012.
Do we have any?
We have Brian here did a study for us in 2017, so those figures that you are provided in that packet there from 2017.
And these figures are from October 2020. Have they been updated?
Not since October 2020, but those would be the most realistic numbers that we have. And
Correct.
I'm sure they're probably pretty good. The numbers probably haven't increased that much in a year that it would be.
Actually, I would think they might have.
Gone through the roof,
Yeah.
so it might be significant.
Yeah.
Well,
It would be something that, if awarded the grant, you would have to put it out to bid and get quotes at that point in time as well. So you would, that's a cost estimate. The issue is when you're talking about cost estimates that are 5-6 years old or more, realistically their ability to be accurate at this point is questionable. And we just don't have that for the other projects. And the fact is that we don't even know exactly, those are worst case scenario cost projections for the engineering, O'Brien and Gear, they did the worst case scenario. So assuming that spillway is completely shot, that there's no way to reuse any of the concrete in it, that they need to send scuba teams in there with concrete mixers and things like that. That is what that cost actually is. Realistically, what needs to be done is an engineering study to see exactly how the current situation at that spillway, rather than doing a hypothetical cost of what this project would be. But with that being said, I just want to make it clear that my purpose here is to help guide the village through a grant application process. My purpose is not to tell the village what to do. So I believe that it would be wise to try to have a discussion about this project rather than me telling you what you should be applying for money for here.
Maybe I'm missing here, but so what would it cost for an engineering report for the spillway?
The numbers that we had from the engineering report, which is this from 2012, that was roughly $180,000.
So
That
we
would be the
could,
engineering report?
Just the engineering, yep.
so we could use this
Environmental
grant
assessment.
to pay for an engineering report for the spillway?
We can use part of we can't use, there are limits to the amount of soft costs that can actually be done with this grant. But yes, we can use part of it to be,
So it wouldn't cover, but we don't have, the grant would not cover the entire cost.
it would cover less, and also, well, so yes, I can get the actual amount about what they're willing to spend on soft costs, specifically just engineering studies.
So could that project be piecemealed? I mean, could we do it in stages in regard to the dam, the spillway, couldn't that be piecemealed so that they were smaller chunks of cost? And because quite frankly, and I've said this to all of you, I understand the interest in the emergency connect, and it is that, an emergency connect.
Correct.
And I understand the county's position about we could become a supplier, but I think that we need to take care of home first, and the commodity is the water in the reservoir, and I think we need to make sure that the reservoir is in a good shape before we do an interconnect with a neighboring facility. Here's the other thing that I'm a little concerned about is this letter from Paul Snyder indicates, and this is the first time I've heard this, and maybe you guys knew this before, but if we were to construct this interconnect, it becomes part of the North County Water District. I thought we were dealing directly with Dunkirk. How did this happen?
I don't know if that's his opinion or what his thoughts are on that, but let me go back to your question about the reservoir. To work on that, I mean, if you listen to what I had read there, let's say you work on the reservoir and that screws up the drinking system for the village, what do you have to fall back on?
Well, don't we have both connections?
And he
at
also
the
said
county?
that that's not adequate
and
enough to give
Vineyard.
us a full redundancy. It would partially, it does not, for our usage that we have, and even at maximum,
That was not my understanding either. I thought that the whole Vineyard Drive thing, plus the two connections with
No,
both
that-
ends,
well-
would give us, I mean, not forever, but for, a period of time.
I don't believe so, given
No?
the pump
Okay.
capacity of Vineyard Drive plus the limited capacity of,
That's what it breaks down to, and actually, the new capacities from Vineyard Drive, the actual numbers, that was not the made-up numbers, and you got the capacities of the actual from the east and west onto Route 20, and it came up to more than the daily usage that we have
Yeah.
for residential and other uses. So yeah, that was, to me, it's not a factor. And also the idea that they keep throwing the hospital in there. The hospital's been already approved for what the water supply we have, all the plans and the seeker and everything, everything has been approved for the use of the hospital. So to keep saying that the hospital may be in jeopardy of not being able to be there because of the water is not true. That's not, otherwise that would have been a factor in the approval of those plans. So they need to stop
Years.
throwing that in there.
We've waited years for that to come through.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope that it comes, maybe I do, not sure, because of where it's at.
Let me ask you,
Maybe we should put it on Carroll Avenue.
Where did you get the figures? I realize that the city of Dunkirk engineer there gave maximum figures, but those were not,
Well,
those were not figures that would be a comfortable
they did the
term
test.
to use. They said, I believe in that email that the engineer from the city of Dunkirk gave us, I'm not sure that was any long-term thing there or anything, but, I don't know what the effects were. They said what the pump capacity maximum could be, but they did a test, and the comfortable level they felt that it would not draw from other places was a less than the maximum amount. So, it's just, you could play, guessing, hopefully that would work. Maybe it would work, I don't know, but I can tell you that the month-long water crisis that we had last year, that our residents do not want to put up with it, and don't deserve that
Now,
from
that's another
us.
thing. That would have never been a problem if the connections that we are currently, the ones that are going to be connected, that we approved for a connection, and the current status of the Vineyard Drive were actually functioning, because none of that happened, was functioning at the time of that issue. So that would have not have been an issue today. That would not be an issue next year when all those connections are made. So that they keep throwing that in there too. They need to stop that. That's ridiculous to keep saying that, because there was some problems that came up that were beyond our control, and it was had to do with the Vineyard Drive pump station that should have been operational before those other things even happened. So that I'm not buying that crap either.
Travis, I got a question.
Sure.
5/8 of this project is actually located in the city of Dunkirk.
Yeah.
Why are we funding it? It's a two-way street.
When Mayor Landis was here, North County Water District and the city of Dunkirk were gonna fund, 2/3 of that project. At least the discussions have began about that. I don't know how far it went. But, and here we are being asked, as he just said, to put that into Dunkirk, pay for the whole thing, $2.5 million, and almost all of it's in Dunkirk.
Well, again, I want to
So-
finish my question, but thanks, Jim.
No,
So 5/8 of this project's located in Dunkirk, and Jim kind of answered some of the question for us. And again, based on the information you gave us, you said that this could be a source of water to Dunkirk in case of emergency, vice versa. So again, I would like to see, if this project goes forward, that why aren't we talking with Dunkirk to help us fund this kind of project? Because it does work for both of us. It does not work for just us.
I could answer that. Earlier in the last, or when, was it, I can't remember, I believe it was late in the fall last year, I did sit down with the county and Paul Snyder and City of Dunkirk officials, and at that time, they do not have the funding for this. Would like to say that, yes, during the North County Water District's wanting the Village of Fredonia to get into it, they were gonna pay that, but during Mayor Landis's term, when we had that water study done, and it was determined that the Village of Fredonia did not want to get into that, they said, okay, they used the money for other purposes, so, you know, the deal was dropped during the last administration, so I don't know what to tell you.
The other thing too is who would be maintaining that section from the Dunkirk line to their pump station, to their actual tower? I mean, again, here's a situation, we're funding this project, we're paying for this project. Now, do they maintain it? Do they take care of it? Do they test it? I mean, again, these are questions that, you know, are they doing it properly? Are they not doing, I mean, there's a lot of things behind all this other than just,
Well, in addition to that, Roger, this comment from Paul Snyder indicating that the interconnect would actually be with the North County Water District. So what's the rate then? It's not, now we've taken away the ability to negotiate with the city of Dunkirk directly, any rate, because now the North County Water, it was never my understanding that an interconnect, when we first started talking about this, involved the North County Water District at all.
yeah, because our contract's with Dunkirk.
Right. So now we've thrown the county in, and I guess, Doug, you're right. I mean, is this something he's just assuming will happen, or do we have to include them?
I don't know. I mean, right now, we're just trying to fill out a grant application and give it a project that seems feasible. We could put in the spillway in the dam, but that is $5 million or more, and this grant only, the maximum for the grant is $1 million. So I know there was a lot of concern of where the balance of the funding for any of these projects would come from.
Yes.
So
Well,
the bigger the project, the more funding we're gonna have to find and
well,
come
that's
up
the
with.
thing
Can
that,
I ask a
Sure.
question?
Go ahead.
All right, so say that
For the purpose of the grant application, we put in the interconnect as the project. And then say we find out in a couple of weeks or whatever that about the North County Water District, and we decide we don't like where that's going. Can we just then decide not to take the grant?
Yes.
Well, moreover, are we obligated then, let's say we get the grant for $1 million, and we don't find any other sources to cover the 1.5 million that's now the village's responsibility. Can we say we don't want this grant because we can't match the monies?
Yes.
And then we
You
look,
absolutely can do that.
and then,
Yeah.
just like Frank Pagano said 2 weeks ago, how's that put us in the standing with grants in the future if we apply and don't have the monies up front, or have some idea of where the money's coming from up front before we do that? Because bonding right now, to me, is not an issue. It's not a possibility. It's not an option. We have our debt load, and if we read the Moody report, thank you for being here, Alyssa. The Moody report indicates that our debt load is rather significant, and that any further debt load will affect our rating. The effect of our rating falling has grave effect on our costs. Premium, insurance premiums, interest rates, the ability to borrow money in an emergency situation. I mean, it has a lot to do with it. So we can't incur, or we shouldn't incur, any more debt. So this, to me, is not an option. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but borrowing or bonding is not an option for that 1.5 million that actually is essentially the village's responsibility. And I would have liked to have spoken about this between us long before tonight. When we received your presentation last night, we were forwarded what you sent to our clerk, and thank God we were. When we reviewed that, those were the questions that I immediately had. I wrote you immediately, where does that money come from? And, you know, how come we haven't had these conversations long before now?
I don't think that process of this grant was, I mean, this was like a tight thing when they opened it up and gave the deadlines for this, so.
They opened it up in May.
It was open in May. We had to do a discovery period of what grant we actually would be the best fit for the village. We looked at Main Street grants, we looked at CDBG, so we looked at HCR, we looked at these various programs. This is what we settled on as an infrastructure project. The mayor has had infrastructure as a priority project this year, indicating as early as January with myself and I'm sure with all of you that this infrastructure is critical and it's the path forward for Fredonia. So we looked at grants that would fit into that category. So this was something that would fit with that. With that being said, I do agree having more communication on this sort of thing is better. The more, the better. So that we're not playing Monday Night Football, we're not trying to figure out how to come up with a matching fund kind of thing the last minute before we're submitting a grant that we're not even sure we really want to do the project on. I agree. Communication, this kind of communication, it should happen more quickly. It was the process that we went through to get to this point, and that is why we are having this meeting at this point, because we wanted to go through and see what kinds of projects were available. And once we started getting the cost estimates in, it did become, I mean, those are not cheap projects. Anything dealing with water, multi-million dollar projects, and for good reason. We want to make sure that we have fresh water here.
But the same questions remain as they did when we first talked about this. This is a wonderful idea. We're all in agreement that we would benefit, our communities would benefit. The biggest question is, where does our portion of the money come from? And I understand that there may be sources to seek out, but it's still, even if we got half the money, the $750,000 that we would still need to come towards is not something that I think we can expend at this time. And that was stated back then. And we've pursued these. I think I wrote a month ago to you about how come we haven't talked to Scott Marsh about some infrastructure programs that probably the $300,000 could have covered almost all of that wish list with very little input or with budgeted monies from the DPW and for streets and so on and so forth without costing us an arm and a leg. And I think, again, it's wonderful to go to these projects, but the biggest question is, in this climate, where does our portion of the money come from? Not a criticism of the projects. We'd love to do it. If we had the money, let's do it. But
You're absolutely right, but sooner or later, these projects have to be done. And as far as Scott Marsh, this DPW superintendent, he just took over last month, so.
he had
before
quite a
that-
list.
Pardon me?
He had quite a list of things that could have been done under the public infrastructure, because he read the
Water main
list.
replacements and stuff.
And
yes.
sidewalks, and I mean, there's a whole list of things that this grant
Okay.
can cover.
I mean, if this board feels comfortable that the current interconnections are adequate to supply and for future.
We didn't say
needs-
that, though, Doug.
That's
Yes, you
not-
did. You
that's-
did say that.
I-
You said the
I said that.
interconnect.
I said that,
The
but-
interconnects were able to
But I
solve.
think, I
That's
want
fine.
to make my point on this as far as the mayor has been pushing infrastructure and the interconnection since he took office. And, but especially in light of some new information from our water treatment plant supervisor as far as the spillway and stuff, it is definitely more vital more vital to deal with our spillway than to deal with the interconnection at this time, and to spend money into the city of Dunkirk when we need to be spending money on the spillway. Yeah, it is costly, and we have to find a way to pay for our portion of it. If this would help and we could find the portion of it, it'd be great. But you also said that there would be possible for other areas. And none of this board, until, what I think today, you brought forward the actual spillway as the decided thing to be, or not spillway, I'm sorry, the interconnection as the decided project. And I don't think this board actually decided that. There was three projects presented, and here we are today before the hearing discussing this. All of this should have been discussed in previous workshops, not here today before the public hearing. And so here we are trying to make a decision right now on a spillway the interconnection that's being pushed by the North County Water District and a project of the mayor's. When we have more critical, vital issues that need to be dealt with that pertain directly with the village, and that has to be dealt with. And I think we will find ways to do it, but I would hope that if this would help us with that, and you could find the other money, I'd be glad to move forward with the spillway. But as far as going with the interconnection at this point, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense.
Okay, Trustee Linden, I can tell you from past meetings, I not only encouraged discussion on any of this, I begged from the board to get input on any of these projects. There's been crickets. Nobody has wanted to discuss this unless we get everything fully paid for, we find stuff to do. You want to do the reservoir, the spillway, that's great. Trustee Bashaw is wondering where we're going to come up with $750,000
Well,
maybe.
we're not done.
I'm not, I didn't, please stop, I didn't interrupt you.
I'm sorry, yep.
You want to do the spillway, it was $5.3 million 4 years ago. So instead of coming up with $750,000, we have to look for maybe $4 or $5.7 million. So that's fine.
Right, maybe
Oh,
we
even
can be.
piecemeal in that, you're worried about where we're coming up with even the smallest amount of money in this here, so.
But we won't
Does
know.
does this grant require matching funds?
It does.
Then we might have looked at other grants, because I think we probably should have had a discussion with our treasurer and with us in regard to matching funds. If we're looking at any project for $1 million, we can't match that.
Well, it's a 5% match.
Okay,
So it's tiny, but again,
Okay.
it's obviously, it is money, I do agree. Just to,
yeah.
right,
it
to
is.
rewind just for
But
a
that's lot,
second.
Yes, less than.
The engineering the soft costs, like the admin, engineering, that sort of thing, they can only be a total of 20% of the total project cost for this grant. That's actually a HUD stipulation that they only want 20% of the total grant
So
to be
that's
going toward.
$200,000.
It could be, yes, but then what's complicated is what do you do with that other $800,000 budget? Like, it's hard to craft a budget
Right.
for what that would actually look like.
Yeah, well,
We've been working on one. We've been working on trying to figure out, based on national averages, based on the height of the spillway and the national averages of how those things are repaired, based on worst case scenarios, what that could potentially cost. But it's kind of very much up in the air, and the numbers are 7 figures plus all the time. For doing worst case scenario, like the spillway is going to fall apart kind of repairs, that is always extremely expensive. I do agree. I think engineering is very, very important. I think it's really the first piece of the puzzle here, because frankly we don't know if this is something that you can just temporarily close the spillway and patch those things, or if you really need to excavate the whole thing, dig it out, and completely replace it. We just don't have that information. That's what an engineering study would actually do. So that can be done. I think if we find a budget or a project that could do that plus something else at the spillway or at the dam, the reservoir, that could be really great. Like I said, I'm not trying to come up with these ideas. I think it needs to come from the village about what
Well,
projects need to happen here.
what, I think I think it really is necessary to do the engineering study in order to move forward with that. Again, I don't know, without the engineering study, you'll never know if it could be piecemealed, you don't
That's
know.
right.
And we're not gonna be able
Yeah.
to, include that in this grant. But are we willing to allow a connection to become the North County Water District's connection? And if so, does that put us in a position to ask them for 2/3 of the money? And then you could do your study and do the connection with that portion of. And our responsibility would be, $50,000 if that were the
Well,
case.
that's a whole
but-
lot of unknowns, and then, and you're.
There is,
you're
it
here
is.
For
Yeah.
a public
It's-
hearing, you can't have a public hearing on unknowns.
Well, we're having a public hearing on a lot of unknowns, because there's really nothing concrete here except for proposed projects.
Right.
So,
So, I mean, I think that,
we would have to reconvene, obviously, and I don't know about time frame, but
This is due July 30th.
yes.
so-
And so, again, we have gone through a lot of time, but I don't think even tonight, I had anticipated that we had something set. When I contacted you and you said we have a fresh water, that's why we didn't, want to talk to Scott Marsh about any ideas in regard to infrastructure, because we had something in place for fresh water. I wrongly assumed that there was something in place concrete, that the grant would be written about, and that tonight's public meeting would present that material for public input, and that tonight, we also sought an answer as to whether or not, after the public hearing, we could vote on this particular to have the application move forward and be approved by the board. I don't see where we're in any position to have a resolution for anything tonight, and there would have to be some very quick turnaround in order for there to be a resolution anytime in the very near future, to see if we could get some backup from the county or from Dunkirk, or to move forward on that. Anybody have any other ideas? I mean, where are we at?
Well, I think an interconnect's a really good idea.
Yes.
I wish we could do it.
it's not
Yeah.
that it's a bad idea.
No.
But that's just,
Absolutely.
okay, I'm just saying, that's my opinion, right?
Sure.
But what I'm concerned about is, I know from some of the stuff that I've done, that the materials that are related to this project in the past year have grown between 200 and 400%. So everything is doubled, tripled, or quadrupled in price. So I don't think that 2.5 is actually even close to what it would be currently with materials.
Well, we don't have an
probably
actual
right.
estimate for then any project.
Correct, right, but what I was getting to
I understand what you're saying.
was that even just a new study, just a new estimate, you use some of this money for an estimate for how much the interconnect would actually cost, because I have a feeling it might be double that. I mean, I don't know, I was in Home Depot today. Drywall, a piece of drywall is double what it was a year ago, right? Some of the wood that I bought, 4 times what it was a year ago.
Sure.
And I would admit, and I did some plumbing a couple weeks ago. The copper pipe was double what it was a year ago. Actually, it was more than double.
You're a handy guy.
So, and this is much more heavy duty materials than the stuff that I buy. So, I mean, even that would be a useful, something to use that grant for, but to find out how much the interconnect actually would cost now. And then at least we would have a realistic idea of how much it would cost and how we can do it.
We have a rough idea what it actually does cost.
Right, you have.
Again, this would be just sharpening the pen on that project, if you wanted to.
But if things have doubled, 2.5 becomes 5. That's,
I get that, but I'm just saying, you're right, use this money as an engineering study to fine tune it,
yeah, yes.
So now we have
I got
a
you.
more realistic, solid number as of
Right.
today.
But
if that's possible.
But he said he can only use 20% of the,
Correct.
20,
Yeah.
so-
20% of the total project
yeah,
costs
so
can be
you
used
can't,
for.
yeah, I mean,
For the engineering study
Yeah,
or
so-
whatever.
Right. All soft costs, admin,
Yeah.
engineering, all that.
But we have a lot of that done already.
The other thing is, wasn't, this study was done by Garrett O'Brien, right? Who were they?
That's correct.
yeah,
And-
O'Brien and Gear,
And they're Rambo now, right?
That's correct.
right.
That's also kind of part of the issue where, we've been trying to work with,
Yeah.
Chris Serma and like, we're just not getting
Yeah,
feedback.
Right.
So,
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
so I think that's the other thing, is we're working on an old quote that now that company has sold to somebody we're currently working with and negotiating some things with, that, we may have some difficulties moving forward.
they didn't seem very interested in providing an updated cost analysis, I can tell you that.
There are three things in this thing. Is there anything else that we can tap into that we're ready to? I mean, out of the 50,000, what was the other one, 100,000?
300,000.
300,000. Is there anything in there that we can tap that we're ready for? I mean, not just to let it go, but let's just say, is there anything we have in our pocket that we could pull out and throw on those other two?
That's a
But
good
you'd have-
question.
Wouldn't that have to be,
Well, again,
Ready before
I would
TK
want to talk to
was
Scott Marsh. He was the one who called and said, hey, I have some great ideas. He read through the whole grant.
I know.
I have some great ideas as to how we could do this, and
But
that's when I
time-wise,
reached
I'm
out to
talking about
Travis.
time-wise. But
Well, I think that if he has these projects and he has the ideas of the costs,
Like you said, even if it's just $300,000,
Yeah.
I'm happy to put something together based on just that. If he has projects that would add up to something like that. Where
well, even the public infrastructure, we don't have to go for the whole million, right?
Of course not.
Right.
No.
Because I think more of his projects may be infrastructure.
It
They
was. There was.
Yeah, and in that, we could also use some of that monies for engineering costs.
All right.
And maybe other engineering costs. What was the project that was down on Eagle Street, that train cross, that trestle thing, that,
oh, yeah.
maybe we need to look at that.
That-
We
that-
have a whole
that
list of
needs to
things
get
we have to
done.
do.
Actually,
That
has-
could be
that-
part of that project.
we're required to
part
get
of
that done.
money.
We never
Yes.
did engineering studies or anything on that to get, I mean, those were just things that the board was told by the past DPW superintendent that the DEC is requiring us to do
Yeah.
probably by, I think it's probably already
Couldn't
overdue.
we use this money to do that though, Doug? Couldn't we use this money to get that
You
done?
can use the money for whatever purpose the board decides to use it for.
But I'm just saying, what do we have that's close to being tweaked that we could just jump on and throw in there?
If we have a project, public infrastructure project or public facilities project that has a hard cost that we can actually plug into this, then I'm happy to go back and change narrative and hopefully reschedule one of these hearings in the next week or two, and we can get something in.
How does
I'd
the
like to
hard-
at least get something.
How does the hard cost, how is it determined? Is our supervisor of streets able to provide that hard cost?
Well, it does depend on what he has. If he can do a cost estimate, I don't know what kind of cost estimating ability he does have.
Right.
And then again, we do need to have a conversation with demonstrating the ability for the village to match this fund too. That's a big. I don't know. If, I assume you read through the grant, and
Yes.
that's a major part of what they're looking for in terms of grant criteria for scoring it. They want to see that the village can pay for this thing.
At 5%.
5%, yes, correct.
Well, I think 5% of 300,000 is probably a lot more doable than 5% of $1 million at this point. I think we have to get some of our debt load off before we even start incurring more debt, so that we don't affect our rating. Alyssa, what's your thought?
I agree, I wouldn't want to take on any more debt currently. I mean, it would be great to do these projects, but money-wise, especially with the last 2 years, I know we're getting the money from the government, from the COVID money, but that's not really going to cover enough.
Well,
That's an
then the village, didn't we lose almost $500,000 in revenues last year?
479,000.
And how much are we getting from the COVID?
502.
1058,
Yeah.
1.058.
All right, so, I mean, it seems like the first installment should be
Over
used to
2
cover
years.
lost revenue and
Just 2
replenish the general
years.
fund, right?
Right.
So not used for infrastructure, so it really leaves $500,000 for next year.
Right,
Now,
next
is
year.
this grant annual or is this every once in a while?
It is annual.
It is annual,
So it's the kind of
okay.
thing that, you know, if we start planning now, we can apply for it next year. And I would invite us to have, you know, conversations where we actually go through and, you know, go through the list of projects and figure out what would be a good fit for it.
Well, I would really like to see an updated estimate for the interconnect with a different company.
Well, the interconnect was, that estimate was done by Clark Patterson Lee.
Oh,
I believe
okay.
they actually did that for free.
Oh, all right, that's not, oh, okay.
Yeah, so things like that, we might be able to get some cost estimates with, you know, I mean, it's part of their business development. They'll put together a cost estimate to, in this assumption that you probably want to hire them, right, to do the work.
Right.
So that's the kind of thing that we might be able to actually get without having to like go out to do a formal bid and things like that. The engineering study for the reservoir, that is going to require, that's not a freebie. That's a, and that I believe in the research that I've done, like this was the one that was done 10 years ago. And the DEC report I saw from 2019 indicated that a new version of this needs to be done in 2022. So I do agree, like, you know, if we need to spend $250,000 to do this, that would be a really great place to try to find some money to do that.
Absolutely.
Because we're going to have to find probably a new engineer and go through a bidding process and stuff.
Right. But, and again, we know that this grant happens every year. I guess my question is, Travis, during all this that we've been sitting around with COVID, being able to just kind of, why haven't we had these discussions in the past year to get this going? For, you know, from last year to this year,
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I begged the board to discuss this with you. You're absolutely right. I wanted to have input. Nobody wanted to have any input on anything that I had an idea of. So I wish we did have discussions. There was crickets. The board decided not to want to discuss it.
I don't know if we saw it in the light of Doug, of the CDBG grant. I think
Or
that,
any idea,
yeah.
any of these infrastructure ideas were not discussed at all, and not even willing to be discussed. So, I mean, you can say, well, why did we discuss these? That's a good question. Why wasn't the board willing to discuss these in the past?
Well, why weren't we willing to discuss them in the form of a grant? That was one thing. We did discuss them, and I think the direction at the time, if I'm not mistaken, I remember discussing the storage tank. I remember
You were
discussing.
against that.
Yes, I still am, because I still feel that the two connects with the North County on either side and the Vineyard Drive thing would take the place of the water tank. And I think that, and that's the redundant. There's a lot of maintenance in a water tank. There's a lot of work to keeping water in a water tank, and it can only stay there for so long. Yes, I'm still opposed to the water tank, but I think that the interconnect has always been a desire to all of us. But we never talked about money, and it stopped there when we said, well, geez, you know, it's gonna cost $2.5 million, and we never had any further discussion because the money stopped us. And I think that that's really where we needed guidance and, you know, as to where that could come from. And now we're looking at a deadline and still not knowing where our portion of the money is gonna come from.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, you said you feel we don't need a storage tank, but our chief water operator, Chris Surma, said his thoughts were we do. I guess
Sure.
I'm wondering what qualifies you to be able to determine that beyond the people who actually are working in those jobs or engineering studies. We had an engineer study do it. They thought that was a very viable idea based on the needs and fire service and load and stuff that we have right now.
Well,
And based on the idea that our infrastructure right now is very fragile. We have water main breaks regularly, and each water main break could lose 1 million gallons of water in less than an hour. And we don't have the current storage for that, to be able
Right.
to do that.
I talked to Chris about that, and I said to Chris, now, and this discussion happened before we connected the two at either end with North County. That discussion about the water tank happened before we approved that. It also happened before the repairs to Vineyard Drive. Once that was done, I did speak with Chris Surma and say, is it still necessary for us to have a storage tank if all of these interconnects are working and functioning? And he said he would still like to have one, but was it absolutely necessary? No, he didn't think so. And he did say those words, hey, I'd like to drive a BMW too, but I don't. We just can't afford that. And I think that we would like, she drives a BMW, that's why I pointed at her, yeah. But those are the truthful matters. We did kind of hit our bucket list way back when we talked about the storage tank and we talked about the interconnect. And out of those projects, I still prefer the interconnect to any kind of storage tank.
With the interconnect, that's great, but you purchased the water, and Chris's logic with the storage tank was, you know, we have a large main break, you could utilize that without having to purchase water, and you kind of balance, you know, get the system stabilized in a very easy, short period of time without any, you know.
But my
buying
comment to
water.
that was, we could buy a lot of water for $2.5 million.
Yes.
So
Okay.
that's,
This is-
Do you think the tank's a better idea than the interconnect?
No, I think the interconnect's the best idea, but I think the tank is also needed in addition to that, because this, nothing is guaranteed, and I can, and I've had discussions with Chris too. I've had discussions with Chris, I've had discussions with Scott, I've had all these discussions as well.
Yeah.
These are all needed things. I think Chris's discussion with you was, if he had to prioritize, that wasn't the highest priority in his eyes, but it's still a needed thing. He's not saying it's not needed, and it's not a Cadillac thing. It's just something that we would need based on our infrastructure that we have that's unstable.
we have a
Well, if
redundant
you-
supply that we didn't have now, though.
Right.
And I hope you are very,
Well, and you won't have water to fill a tank if you don't have a spillway and a dam to hold it in the reservoir.
And it has to be emptied so often and treated anyway. I mean,
There's
it's.
maintenance, there's a
Yes,
lot of maintenance, there's a
yeah.
lot of cost to it.
a lot of cost to everything.
Yeah, I
There's a
don't-
lot of cost to
And
everything,
again, I don't
there
want to
is.
put up a tank when the town of Pomfret starts expanding, and they start business development.
Down along the 60 there, and they start to develop, they need more water, we need a more holding tank.
Sure.
Maybe we'll talk to them about working together with a
Yeah.
tank.
I'm just asking the board to make the most educated, prudent decisions to keep our infrastructure safe and productive for our residents.
There's a lot of
here.
broken pipes underground, and we need work too, so I think.
$31 million worth.
Yeah, so again, that might
Plus
be
replace
something we
all
should
of them.
concentrate on
Maybe we
fixing
should
some
do
pipes.
that in the
Well, I mean,
village
we-
and look at those.
Absolutely. There's
I
no.
mean, we
these are all-
recently did a, water, break detection,
Yeah.
and we made.
We determined where some of these are.
We made a significant dent in our water loss, which was part of the complaints, the amount of usage that they were saying that we used. We were losing about, more than 40% of our water that we're producing?
Yeah.
And we've
That was
reduced it.
included with water main breaks too. That was
Yeah.
not just the little.
Well,
Well,
leaks.
that's breaks, I
Yeah.
mean, that's still, but if we, made a big dent in that, overall, and if we should do that periodically, to at least find where where we're having issues that we're not aware of.
Solve some of this brown water issue that we have throughout the village. I mean, let's look at some of that.
That kind of stuff too, yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
these are all high priority things in my
Yeah, sure
opinion.
they are.
They really are. There's not one that really, although if you're gonna be doing work on our spillway and our reservoir, that could take our whole water supply out of service. And then if you do not have the guaranteed redundant water source, we're gonna have problems. We're gonna have major problems. So, I mean, just decide what you wanna do with this grant here and let's move forward, I guess.
I do think it is, like I said, communicating about these opportunities. The mayor and I did comb through the entire 2021 grant opportunity book, the 300 pages of it, and these did seem like the best fit based on the priorities that the mayor did give to me. But these other projects, they're all very important, like you said. Any of them are a good thing. let's see if we can find something that, you know, if we have a cost estimate, have a budget put together, have something, a commitment from the village that we'd be able to make the match, and we can get one of these things in before the end of the month. Absolutely.
So
We still have to have another
Match
public
the-
hearing?
Yep.
the match for the
If,
interconnect.
well, to answer your, not to interrupt. If we stick with public infrastructure, I believe that would be that's the quote project. Out of the 3 projects here, we wouldn't necessarily have to have another public hearing. We would have to have a municipal resolution stating that we'd be doing that kind of thing with that kind of cost kind of thing. If we went with public facilities, we would have to have a separate public hearing kind of like this.
So if we changed it from
One project
infrastructure to another?
Correct, yeah. It may be worth it. I'm not saying, yeah.
Well, I just texted Scott, and my question to him was, how quickly and accurately could you provide us a list of projects that could be done with the infrastructure, regarding the infrastructure, that could be completed in the application by the end of the month? I'm waiting.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, but if we did the grant for the interconnect, our 5% of that $1 million is $50,000, right? So where do we get that from?
No, it's 1.5 million.
No, I know, but
Just for the, yeah.
it's the
match.
the matching for the match.
Well,
they give us $1 million. We have to match the
You would far
1.5?
exceed the match at that. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
paying over $1 million, you'd be like 250% match or 150% match.
We have to come up with the rest of it to do it.
No, I know.
Right.
There's not
I
enough.
know
And our
that.
match would
It's
be
the
included in
1.5 plus the.
No, not plus.
No, not plus, no.
Our
it's
match
the
would be part of that
5%.
1.5.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Our match is
Oh, it
part
is.
of
Oh,
it.
it's
So it's
included.
not like,
Yeah.
It's a
yeah.
minimum,
Yeah.
minimum of 5%.
They're not like double dipping, like
Right.
telling you.
It's
to-
just part of it.
All right, I mean, if we can come up with
We're
this other
waiting.
stuff, that's great, but just in the interest of securing this loan or the grant, I think applying for the interconnect makes sense, but I'd also want to see for sure that we could back out of it if we had to.
Right. Yeah.
And I feel that we should not do that unless we have the matching funds.
But that's where
Before,
I was
no, beforehand,
Okay.
because it will put us in a different category if we are granted, we are awarded the grant and then we don't use it.
It's gonna,
That's a bad
it's
thing to do.
really
Yes.
bad when you refuse
Yes,
a
it
grant.
is. Yeah.
It's really bad,
So you're better off not applying at all.
yes.
Or applying for less
Okay.
money and doing something different with it
And
than it
that was
is.
kind of my point.
Yeah.
If we
I
could
can
afford
tell you,
something smaller.
Not in this administration and not the past administration, the village board did refuse a safer grant to hire 8 firefighters worth millions of dollars over a period of 3 years. The village board at that time refused that grant. Now, I can tell you, if the state really had issues with people, municipalities refusing grants after that was awarded to Fredonia, they got awarded that, and the board refused that. So if you're thinking that, the state is going to
These are federal monies though, Doug.
but either way, I mean, it's been done in the past. Whatever.
To use, I mean,
the-
not to use Dunkirk as a case study, but if you recall, back in like 2012, they had a lot of issues with their CDBG program. They still are a entitlement community. They still receive millions of dollars from HUD every year for community development block grant funding. They had to go through a major restructuring of their program and stuff. So I would caution that I wouldn't necessarily say that it's not worth applying out of fear of that, because this is such a vital piece of infrastructure. I don't think that it's not like you're rehabbing a building or doing beautification or something like that.
Right.
Like, this is something that's literally life or death. Someone could get sick and die.
Right,
This
yeah.
has been an issue in Fredonia for a long time.
It has
But-
been on the state's radar too. During that last year's crisis, the state health department was involved, and everybody from the state level. So it's not like nobody knows that we have a massive infrastructure issue here, along with I'm sure other communities.
But all of the things that brought that forward are being dealt with. The plant is essentially gonna be a new plant. And the repairs have been having to do with that issue.
Well, and again-
This is different.
The two questions that come to mind is, where would our portion of the money come from without bonding it? And number two, are we willing to relinquish any kind of interconnect to the North County Water District? We weren't even willing to talk to them for a long time.
That's right.
And now, what does that involve if we relinquish that to the North County Water District? Do they set the rate? Well, how does that work?
And why wouldn't it be Dunkirk?
Well,
That's what I don't
well,
understand.
that's what the assumption was when we first started talking
And
about
that
this.
was my
is that
discussion
would-
when I sat down with City of Dunkirk officials,
Yes.
that would concur with the current agreement that we have with our current interconnect.
Right, with Vineyard Drive, you mean? So there was no discussion about North County Water District, right, Doug?
That is correct. As far as your matching funds, we have 500,000, the village has $500,000 this year from the American Relief Plan that could be used for infrastructure, so you have $500,000 there. And we do still have probably a healthy fund balance in our water fund.
1.5 million.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's,
Haven't we already kind of made some use of the COVID money, the 500, I think we've already
I thought we were replenishing the general fund with that.
committed some of that money to capital
Capital,
and stuff
I'm
like that.
sorry.
So some of that money's been already
Yeah.
spoken for.
Yeah,
So to say that we could use that is,
well, what has it been actually used, allocated for already? And has that been a board resolution, or why is that allocated already without resolution?
It was
There's
not a
no resolution.
resolution. It
Sorry?
there's
was,
no resolution, we just found the amount. Didn't we just get it in the last week?
Yep.
How much we were even gonna get?
Yes.
Yeah, we haven't discussed where that's gonna go. But
Okay,
I
so
did
it hasn't
think
been allocated yet. then.
during the budget process, we did say we would use whatever monies we had that we received from the American Relief Act to replenish the monies used, especially in reducing the tax rate, to replenish those monies out of our general or capital funds.
So where are those monies going to? What needed to be replenished is my question.
The money we used,
From what?
the
What-
fund balance.
the fund
So it's a
balance.
fund balance that needs to be
Yeah.
replaced.
Right.
Something I had suggested at the beginning to do, utilize that to,
Well, we did end up using what, 300 and some odd $1,000 of the fund balance to offset the tax. We did use it.
yeah.
And that's what we were gonna replenish that with, right?
Yes, and then we had said, I think it was a police car and one other thing.
Right.
Yes,
so
something
we have
like the fire
roughly
department.
$200,000 left
A
of the
drying
500
thing.
that hasn't been unofficially allocated.
Yeah, there's that.
The drying rack with the police department,
Oh, that's right.
60-some thousand dollars.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Whatever,
Well-
whatever. I leave it up, I mean,
What's everybody think? Where do we go with this?
Wait to hear from Scott, maybe he could throw something together with Travis, and maybe Travis could whip up something and call us. in a
I mean,
couple
you
of
got
days.
a very short amount of time, but this.
But as for this, I don't
We
see-
can't move this forward today.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be able to do anything.
And maybe something can come up at the workshop with a good list that we can put together, maybe even if we have to do it, I don't know if we have time for another public hearing or not, but for the smaller amount for some other projects. But if we could find a way to, or if you could find other grants that will put it put us in a position that, along with this, that before the end of this timeline, that you feel that we, more than guaranteed to get, then, for like the spillway, then maybe we can move forward with the larger one. So,
Travis, I believe we have reviewed lots of grants with the CBD, or the,
CFA.
I mean, there's not something that's gonna be popping out at us now all of a sudden. These just aren't all out there to be paying 100% for a majority of everything.
I will say, as something that I could try to do is I could work with that $200,000 engineering report number, and then, go with the $1 million project and kind of work backwards from that to see, working with Chris Surma, working with Scott Marsh to see if there's any way to get $800,000 or not even, just some projects that would be able to afford that plus the engineering study for the dam. that's something that I could do in the next couple days to see if there's,
think
it
that's a
sounds
great
like.
idea.
But
Yeah.
again, let me just, maybe I'm not getting this, but so if we get right up to that $1 million limit,
5%.
then we still have to come up with $50,000.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And where do we get that from?
I guess the little bit that's left in
Well,
the
if it's in the
American
water,
Relief Fund
we have
has
enough,
been-
we have enough in
Yeah.
that water fund.
If we,
Yeah.
if
Okay.
we
We
start
can use the
with,
monies in the water fund. too.
Okay.
Yeah.
For 50,000 we do.
Or the
Okay.
American Relief Fund. We
Right.
could do that.
I would rather
We could
use
do
the
it.
water.
Okay.
Could it be the one that doesn't need a public hearing? The
well, that
public
would be.
infrastructure?
that
No,
would
I
be
mean,
good.
I'm just, it's a thought, it's just a
Yeah.
thought.
Well, I think we'd like to start with that. I mean, let's
Okay.
see what
Yeah.
Scott Marsh has to.
Scott just wrote yes, and I said,
Okay.
give me some thoughts, and he's like, he's excited, so he's,
Okay.
Okay.
but,
Again, cost estimates, as detailed a budgets as possible so that, they really want to see shovel-ready projects. But, if we start with that $1 million amount and then work backwards, and then, 200,000 of that's going to go toward engineering, so we know that, so,
Right.
what is,
I'm sure we could come up with $800,000 worth of projects.
okay,
Between Chris and Scott, and, I really do think that that's quite possible.
So the public hearing will be for the $1 million application, but we don't have to vote on it.
Well, we don't have to hold another public hearing if it's all under that public infrastructure.
So this is just the public hearing to present it to the public
Yeah,
for
what we
the.
want.
Precisely,
What-
precisely.
And we don't do anything else ourselves.
correct, you don't, exactly, this is
Okay.
to solicit comments from the public, things like that. I do want to make sure that we don't 100% need another public hearing for that. If we did, it would mean that we would need to give 5 days notice.
By going forward with a public hearing, does that mean that you actually have to make the application though, or not?
Well,
No, probably not.
no.
Because we don't have an application now.
Right.
So, we
It
will
just
have met.
affords you the ability to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't submit a grant application
Right.
without proof
Okay,
of a
so
public
this,
hearing. Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Exactly.
So this would constitute a public.
The
Correct.
public
Yep.
hearing, okay.
Scott says just off the top of his head, Chestnut Street drainage, water mains that are in need of, west parking lot, which was also part of infrastructure. This off the top of his head, I mean, there's
He could get those numbers within his white paper.
sidewalks, yeah, sidewalks were also part of the infrastructure.
He's
List
got
that.
some stuff pretty.
Yeah,
well
there's,
set.
yeah. There's a lot.
Yeah, just touch base with him. I think that's the way to go.
But I do think that we need to start working now for next year
Yeah.
Absolutely.
and procuring money from other sources and having those discussions with the county and with the city of Dunkirk and with any other sources, Gebbie Foundation, North County Foundation, whatever the case may be, to procure additional funds so that we can apply for that water connection
Aren't there
next
other-
year.
Aren't there other federal programs that are gonna be coming out for infrastructure? Didn't we all hear that?
I thought there was.
I think
There's proposing of infrastructure.
And I thought
Correct,
the state
there's
was,
a-
I thought the state had like some $1 billion.
That's this
Bring things
DEC,
around
that's
the
part of this
corner.
DEC, isn't it?
I do believe there is another program that is coming out for things like trails and sidewalks and things like that through the DEC.
I thought there was a fund that was just for like dams
Yeah,
and,
dams
Yeah.
and reservoirs.
there was one.
For
Yeah.
hazardous dams.
And-
things
Yeah,
like
Well, we
right,
did.
exactly, yeah.
We did put in for a preliminary engineering study through the high hazard dam
That's
grant
right.
through DEC last month, or 2 months ago.
That was it.
And when will we hear about that?
Should be any day now.
Oh, well, let's see where that goes.
Yeah.
And can you
Thanks,
add some
Travis.
crosswalk lights to that amount?
I'm sorry?
Can you add some crosswalk lights to that amount?
Crosswalk. I would love to.
Because there's a pipe under there, maybe we can.
Maybe, some water.
Yeah,
but
put a water line
to
under
kind of
it.
piggyback off of what you're saying too,
Lights that
I
run
do
by
think
water,
that
Switches that run by water.
you know, the reason why, we shouldn't be hashing this stuff out at these public hearings, you're correct. We should maybe have like committee meetings and things like that where we discuss like with business owners along Main Street, like the facade improvement program. Like the reason why we're not putting in another application for that is because we know that we don't have cost estimates from architects and engineers as to how much those projects are gonna cost. We don't have a list of shovel-ready projects, so there are things lacking there that, having conversations starting in maybe September in preparation for next July, I
Right.
think would be really, really helpful for getting Fredonia ready to apply for and secure additional funding for projects like
But
that. So
how do we put the horse before the cart before the horse on some of these projects? Because sometimes you don't even know what they're bringing out, right?
right.
Until they
so
come out late, and then that takes time to get that information together, so.
That's true. I mean, last year they didn't even have a Main Street program.
Yeah.
So, to do that work and then not get it. But I think, to Doug's point, Mayor Essex's point, that having a list of priority projects ready to go, like we've got these water projects, we've got these facades we want
So if something pops out, we plug it in.
Exactly. So really having, projects that we know if we had just a little extra money, we'd be able to, do the engineering on that spillway or this, that, or the other thing.
And the big key is gonna be the funding, that's our portion.
Yeah.
And so that's
Right,
really what we have
absolutely,
to do our homework about where that
Well, we gotta
can
get our
come
debt
from.
load down enough so we
Yes,
can have to bond,
right.
then we'd be in a decent position.
And discuss with other sources as to, are they willing or available to help us out when the time comes? But isn't this CDBG grant the same annually?
Not necessarily. It's based on the state's 5-year plan for community development block grant funding
Right.
usage. So it can vary slightly year to year.
But primarily, those three areas are.
They've been focusing on infrastructure
Yes.
A lot recently
Yes.
through the state CDBG program.
I was curious, in today's paper, maybe you can answer this, Dunkirk CDBG grant was going for baseball.
Baseball, something.
Baseball dugouts, or
Yeah.
where does that fit?
So they are
Public facility.
automatically getting money from the federal government, from HUD. So they have their own plan, their own housing market analysis and things like that they have to submit to HUD every 5 years, and actually every year for their annual plan for obtaining that funding for things like community development related things. I think some communities pay for police officers through it, some communities pay for beautification and parks amenities and things like that. But yeah, they're able to be more creative with how they use their entitlement funding from the federal government.
Because of the HUD qualification?
Correct.
Okay.
Fredonia does not have a large enough population to make that happen on
Right.
its own. So that's why Fredonia, we were looking at
Yeah,
the
we just
state,
have a
which
city.
gets its own allocation.
Which is-
And
population.
We're just not a city.
we just don't have, I think it has to be above, I think it's the threshold, I don't want to speak to it, but it was, well, Dunkirk had a high enough population at one point to get into the program, and they're still in it.
Barely above
Barely.
us.
Right, I'm sure that's probably scratching the bottom there, but they are still securing that funding year after year. So that is why they're able to be a little bit more creative in how they use the funding.
Okay, I just wondered, because I read it and I thought, that doesn't sound anything like what we.
Correct.
what we
That's,
meant.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah, let's get moving.
to circle back, we're going to be talking to Scott Marsh. We're going to get some.
And Chris, I think you need to.
And Chris,
And I think
absolutely.
that our biggest resources, Travis, right now, in regard to projects moving forward, aside from these, aside from the freshwater things we just talked about, are our department heads.
Okay.
They truly are. I mean, we talk about committees, and certainly the trustees want to be involved, but I think discussions need to be had with our department heads. Water treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant probably has some things. I mean, we're in projects, projects there, but I know they have more. And I think that, the water treatment plant, even though we've done a lot up there, I think Chris has some other ideas. And yes, and I know that Scott has a lot. So there are a great resource for where we should go with grant monies and projects.
I do think that you do need to find a way to build a consensus around what projects you would want to target.
Yes.
Again, it shouldn't be coming from me or department heads or something like funneling through me. I'm happy to find funding sources, but it should be the village coming up with ideas for things that you'd like to do that you don't necessarily, you need gap financing for or whatever. And that's where a grant could come in, and so that's where I would come in and try to secure that funding. But absolutely, I'm looking forward to hearing from Scott and working with Chris on additional cost estimates that we can possibly put together. I mean, we have, if we're doing the $1 million grant, we have a quarter of it accounted for already for the engineering study. We just need to backfill what the rest of that could potentially be. But, you know, and in addition to this, we're going to be looking for letters of support from, I know the town of Pomfret, talked to Dan Pecos about this. The town of Pomfret recognizes that this is a vital source for, you know, an emergency situation town as well. So, like, we would be looking for letters of support from other regional entities and other stakeholders as well. So, just getting the budgets is one thing, but we also really want to, in the next week or two, start soliciting those letters and getting those in as well to show that Fredonia is not operating in a vacuum here either.
So just to recap, you're gonna talk to Chris and Scott for ideas. We're going to stick right now with the public infrastructure portion of this grant, hopes that their ideas fall within that, so this public hearing can count. And start with the engineering portion
For the spillway.
cost.
Yep.
And build from there, kind of backwards, as
Correct.
to what Chris's and Scott's ideas are. And we have, as a board, indicated, if I'm not mistaken, that we would use monies from the water fund
Well, it depends
and,
on which
or
ones we
the
have.
American Relief
Right.
Act to make up our portion, our 5% requirement.
And if we do the list backwards so that,
Yes.
our match is 5%.
Right, of whatever it
Right.
ends up being, so.
So like trying to make it so it would be 50 grand,
Sure.
and then finding a way to
Right.
show that the village has the capacity to afford that.
Right. Are we all in agreement with that? Everybody in agreement with that, okay?
That would work.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Travis.
Travis, can
That would give us
I get
$1 million
your
bucks.
phone number to give to
Sure.
Scott? I'll text it to him
Absolutely,
right
yeah.
now, he'll start, he's
Yeah.
blowing up my phone with ideas.
Oh, good, yeah.
Okay.
So that is all I have. I have my marching orders. Hopefully we can keep this so that we don't have to have another one of these public hearings, but we'll know in the next few days if we need another one or not, based on those cost estimates. And if we do, I think we do just have enough time to probably schedule one, get one in the paper and stuff, that do this one more time. But
Just so that you know, we have, our next meeting is not until the 26th of July.
okay, so
Our
that
next
might be
scheduled
just,
meeting, yes.
that could potentially be it, and it could just be, by then we would have everything figured out, we'd have the grant written.
Okay,
But we would need to have
You
all of
need-
that done, because obviously we can't go back and,
Right.
Rewrite it at that point, so.
and then you need a resolution for the trustees to approve the application content.
Approve
Yes.
the grant request and the application
Yes,
content,
okay.
yeah.
All right. And that could happen on the 26th.
Okay. Possibly both.
Both
You
what?
could have the public hearing and.
If we needed one, if we
If you
needed
need
one,
one, yeah, you could have
We
both,
could do that
yeah.
then, if we needed to,
Okay,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other,
yeah,
thank you.
let me,
Thank you very much,
give me my
Travis.
card so that,
Yeah, great.
you'll have Scott's number for.
Yeah. Oh, my.
Okay,
think the word
we'll
is
close
out.
the public hearing portion of
It's
this
good, though, it's good.
meeting. The public portion, I see there's nobody from the public here, so,
Well, the public, number D, letter D would have been when the public spoke for the grant.
yep,
But now that we're in a regular special meeting, we can have a public portion, but there's nobody here. So I
That's
can
right.
read it and you can close it or you can skip it. It's up to you.
I'm just gonna close it. There's nobody here. There's no need for you to read that. I will close section E, public portion of the regular meeting. And this, okay, we'll move on to resolutions.
Whereas notice to bidders have been duly given as required by law for the Village of Fredonia placemaker project, labeled the project, as described in the plans and specifications. And whereas in response to the publicized notice, the village received 2 bid proposals for providing the specific construction with the acquired documents accompanying each proposal. And whereas the bid from Lakeshore Paving, Inc. is the lowest responsive bid for the project. Be it resolved that the bid from Lakeshore Paving, Inc. is hereby accepted and the project is now awarded to Lakeshore Paving, Inc. in the amount of $1,298,122. Be it resolved, I'm gonna add one thing, do we have an address of Lakeshore Paving? All right. Be it resolved that the contract for project between Lakeshore Paving, Inc. and the Village of Fredonia is hereby approved, and be it further resolved that the Mayor Essick is hereby authorized to execute the contract on behalf of the Village of Fredonia.
Do you want a friendly amendment to add the address?
I would like to see it in there, but if you guys want to go ahead
So we
and
can
vote on it.
approve based on,
Yeah.
The
what is,
addition of the address.
yes. Okay. So I'll make, do I have to do that as a second motion then?
Yes.
Motion to amend?
Sure.
Okay, motion to amend to include the address.
Have
I'll
a second.
second that.
Okay, there's been a motion with the amendment in a second. Trustee Linden,
Aye.
trustee Britz.
Yes.
Trustee Bashaw,
Yes.
trustee Johnston.
Yes.
Carried.
So then I'll second the amendment as, or the
Resolution.
resolution as amended.
Correct.
Is there a second to that?
No, I second
he
it
seconded
from what Roger
Fritz's.
said.
Oh, okay. So we need
Aye.
to
Yep.
vote on it again. Trustee Linden,
Aye.
trustee Britz.
Yes.
Trustee Bashaw.
Yes.
Trustee Johnston.
Yes.
Carried.
Okay, whereas Buffalo Construction Consultants, Inc. has proposed an agreement to serve as a construction manager for the Village of Fredonia on a construction project known as the Village of Fredonia Placemaking Project at a cost not to exceed $71,160. Be it resolved, agreement between Buffalo Construction Consultants, LLC and the Village of Fredonia are hereby approved, and be it further resolved that Mayor Essick is hereby authorized to execute the agreement on behalf of the Village of Fredonia.
I second the resolution.
Motion and second. Trustee Linden,
Aye.
trustee
I would
Britz.
like to see the address also added to this, please. Sorry to throw it off, but it should require the address of the firm. That's,
Our attorney wrote that, but I will add the address.
You have to amend that one too?
yeah.
Can I
I'm
have a
sorry
motion
to
to
have done
amend
that
that?
to you guys, but
A motion to amend to include the address?
There's been a motion and a second to amend that resolution to include the address. Trustee Linden.
Aye.
Trustee Britz.
Yeah.
Trustee Bashaw.
Yes.
Trustee Johnston.
Oh,
Carried.
And
now
I
I
need
need, now to continue the vote.
I'd like,
Yes.
okay, well, I may have to go through the whole
have to
thing
go through
again.
again.
Yeah, I need to
Read
go
it
through-
again?
I need, well, no.
No.
I'll call for a vote on the amended
On
resolution
the amended resolution.
Trustee-
The resolution as amended.
as
Yeah.
amended. Trustee Linden,
Aye.
trustee Britz.
Yes.
Trustee Bashaw,
Yes.
trustee Johnston.
Yes.
Carried.
Thank you, sorry about that.
Be it resolved that Mark Rayner of Fredonia, New York is hereby hired as a full-time laborer to work with the Department of Public Works at an hourly rate of $16.16, subject to civil service rules and regulations, and a 6-month probationary period.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second. Trustee Linden,
Aye.
trustee Britz.
Yes.
Trustee Bashaw.
Yes.
Trustee Johnston.
Yes.
Be resolved that Olivia Hilbert of Fredonia, New York is hereby hired as seasonal labor to work with the Department of Public Works at an hourly rate of $13.50 for 4 weeks, subject to the civil service rules and regulations and with no other benefits given.
Second?
Motion and a second for this resolution. Trustee Linden.
Aye.
Trustee Britz.
Yes.
Trustee Bashaw.
Yes.
Trustee Johnston.
Yes.
Before we go to the next resolution there, I just received the agreement for the dog control services, and the total amount is more than what was approved in the budget for that. So,
Yes, actually, before we go through that, we did go back with her, to her, with the amounts that we discussed, and she countered with that, and with a minimum amount that she would take if it was paid by stipend. I've spoken with Erlissa. Although there's an $1,800 difference, it's still cheaper than we've paid in the past, but it's more than we had budgeted with the intention. And Erlissa, you indicated
There is contingency money that we can take to 18.
the 1,800 could come from contingency.
That money hasn't been appropriated. The only money that's been appropriated and approved is $3,000, and this contract is for $4,800. You cannot go enter into a contract without the monies being appropriated for. So the monies aren't, we have it there, the monies have not been appropriated for this contract to be executed.
And
That's-
so,
So we
that's
need
my
a budget
intention.
transfer?
can we propose a budget transfer tonight? Or can we propose a budget transfer at the next meeting and have this contract go into effect? Because we're currently without a dog control officer, and we've already had 2 calls regarding a bite, so.
I want to say,
What-
negotiated this contract when we knew we only had $3,000 and it was negotiated for $4,800?
Well,
I guess is my question.
We didn't
What is her fee if we don't have a dog control officer right now? If we were to call her for a service?
I don't know, because when we spoke with her, we spoke on a per-dog basis. And there was an agreement with that, and it was a considerably less amount of money. But when we came to the meeting, then there was a discussion about we wanted to pay her in stipend form. And so we went back to her with that amount, and she said, well, if you're gonna change that from a per-dog basis to a stipend, I have 3 employees, I want $1,200 a quarter. So at this point, without any dog control officer, we moved forward to, I spoke with Roger, I spoke with Scott, I spoke with Heidi at the time, and said, what do you want to do? And they said, well, we'll just move forward and see what the board says tonight.
Okay.
It's up to you.
Well, obviously, we don't have the funds to cover this contract, so we'd have to have a
Unfortunately, the
resolution.
guy we had in place quit because of how this was handled.
Say it again, Jim?
Unfortunately, the person we had in place quit the position because of the way it was handled.
Well, I think there's a lot more to that, and we can go in executive session if you'd like to discuss it, but
Don't need to, no.
Right now, we don't have a dog catcher.
Right.
And we don't have the money to pay a dog catcher,
And we
so
don't
the
have the money.
question is, how are we gonna get money, or a dog catcher?
okay, so do this for 6 months and do it for $2,400.
That's still within our budget,
Yep,
and she'll be willing to do that under the contract.
yep, just amend it to 6 months and we'll go from there.
We don't have any approval of that. We don't have any contract that says that.
Amend the contract, it hasn't been approved yet, it's sitting right in front of you.
Would she be in agreement? Has this been
I mean,
negotiated?
from them, I mean, we have the contract from them, but not, I mean,
We have the contract, this came from our attorney. It is our contract.
And
You
she
can
could
amend it
reject,
any
she
way
could
you'd like.
reject the contract, even though we approve
What I'm
it.
saying is, we have no indication of her approving this.
We told her that, the 6 months, no, we can call her right now. It just helps with the dog control, I mean, it's up to
We
you.
have a resolution before us. I think you should wait and
I just don't, I don't wanna go without a dog control officer. Right
And we're
now,
not
during
meeting
the
now
summer
until the
months.
26th of July. Either we go for do it for 6 months, or we agree to do a budget transfer at the next meeting and do the contract. How many of us are willing to do a budget contract, a transfer at the next meeting for the $1,800 out of the contingency fund?
I think the 6 months seems like a good compromise, I'm okay with
I'd rather do the 6 months.
Okay,
And then we can transfer funds to cover the other 6 months
Yes,
at the appropriate
absolutely.
time and.
Yep.
So let's approve a 6-month contract,
yep,
see if she accepts it.
it.
yep.
Well, here's the other thing you can do in 6 months, you can find out how many calls there are. And then you can find out if the
This is
per
summer
dog
months.
is cheaper than doing that. I mean, that was the idea of doing that every 3-month payment, was to find out how many dogs were, how
Well,
many calls there were.
the whole point was, we started with this per dog thing so we could have a more accurate thing, and she agreed to it, and we messed that up, so, we kinda took that away from the discussion.
Do you want to pass a resolution for 6 months then?
I would prefer to.
I just don't want to go without a document.
Yeah, I don't think we should.
So what's the date for the 6 month? January 14th, 2022? December 15th?
To December, yep, yeah.
December.
Is that 6 or is it January that's 6?
it's January.
It's January, yep.
January.
And we can amend this at any time. After we talk to her, if we can amend it, so.
So you went into this meeting knowing that there was a discrepancy and we were just gonna pass it as is?
Knowing what discrepancy?
And the monies that were.
You just made the discrepancy. We just made it. From the last night to tonight, we made the discrepancy because we were going per dog. That was when we went into that meeting. And she agreed to per dog, and that was our proposal for per dog.
When
When
was
we
this written up?
talked at a workshop, when we talked at the workshop,
This
we
is a
wanted to
walk-
go
this is
with a
walk-in
stipend
resolution.
thing. She countered with this amount, and the attorney wrote this up to see if we would be interested in passing it, knowing we'd lost our dog control. If you don't, that's up to you, but we had it ready in case. So yeah, we did know. I talked to Alyssa about it. I did know, and I did ask her if there was money to cover it.
But according to this contract, where the board was gonna be willing to pass a contract enter into a contract without the appropriated funds.
Well, or transfer a budget. We could have
Well, it's
done that
not or.
tonight too.
That wasn't an or, it was to go
Well,
past
then-
Yeah, but I
this.
mean, even says,
Yeah.
it says a full payment of services under the contract is $1,200 per quarter.
Right.
It doesn't say anything in the contract.
The
number of
contract's
quarters.
for a year. It's the price is per quarter, but the contract's for a year, so the contract is a year, and the whole
okay,
contract
I see
amount
it
would be
there.
4,800.
But that would
Yeah,
I
actually
see.
fall into the
Okay.
next year's budget too, then, I
Yeah,
assume, right?
well,
Well, we caught it in
Almost.
time, so now let's change
yeah,
it.
so
Move
now we'll
forward.
change it to 6 months. And the resolution doesn't say it's for a year. It just says it begins July 15th.
The contract that would be binding says
Right.
it's for a year.
Well, we can change that. It's our contract.
I get that.
Yeah. We ready?
So are we tabling, what are we going with this, and you're only gonna do it for 6 months?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Whereas the village requires the service of a dog control officer as defined by New York agriculture and market laws, and whereas Denise Zentz has the expertise required to provide the services of a dog control officer services and is ready, willing, and able to provide such services on an independent contractor basis in a professional manner. Now therefore, be it resolved, the independent contractor agreement, dog control services between the Village of Fredonia and Denise Zentz, dated July 15th, 2021, is hereby approved, and be further resolved, the mayor Essex is hereby authorized to execute the agreement on behalf of the Village of Fredonia as amended.
As amended, okay.
I'll second that resolution.
There's been a motion and a second. Trustee Linden?
Nay.
Trustee Britz?
Yes.
Trustee Bashaw?
Yes.
Trustee Johnston?
Yes.
Passed by a 3-to-1 vote. I believe that's it for the,
Either no further business before the board, I'll make a motion to,
Second.
a motion to adjourn in a second. Trustee Linden?
aye.
Trustee Britz?
Yeah.
Trustee Bashaw?
Yes.
Trustee Johnston?
Yes.
Carried. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Doug.
When does the Chief Maslach want to talk to us about it?
Probably at the next board workshop.